Welcome to our 38th podcast. Today we'll be talking about leveraging communication tools for change management. What's one thing you can do now to leverage tools to make your communications more effective? Keep listening to find out.
Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces.
Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Welcome back to our podcast. My name is Rich Cruz. I'm an organizational development consultant, and I am joined by my co-hosts, Cheryl Volpe. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, Rich. Hi, everyone.
And Ben Kleinman.
Hey, everyone.
We thought today we would talk about, communication has been an ongoing theme with us. I think you can't talk about culture, you can't talk about change without communication. But sometimes we don't really talk about the tools that, like just some of the nuts and bolts tools, right, that, I guess pun intended, that we use to keep, communication going. So we thought we'd bring that into the conversation today, yeah?
Yeah, that sounds good. And I think one of the things maybe we'll get into today as well is the idea between tools that you can use, things like software systems or other ways to communicate versus methodologies and other more mechanisms of communication. So it's a subtle difference, but I think it's one worth exploring a little bit, just so that people are clear that there are different levers you can pull to connect with people and to communicate with people. And some of those are one way and some of those are two way. And it's just kind of baked into some of those are synchronous, some of those are asynchronous, all that.
And how different cultures are better at using some of them and not at others.
Yeah, very much so.
Understanding
very
that is super key.
Yeah.
Works for your people.
Yeah.
Well, when we started talking about this, my mind immediately went to, just because of my experience in, almost any time I've done a change management project, right? It's centered around some technology disruption of some kind, right? And so my mind went to tech tools. So is it okay if we start with talking about some of those first?
Yeah, maybe? Cool. Let's do.
Yeah. So I think among my favorite, and it really started back in, I don't know, maybe it was around 2017 or so, was the use of some kind of project management software. I originally was trained on Microsoft Project, which is still there, and then everybody, so many people use it.
I don't know if it's the younger cousin or the stepchild, but Microsoft Excel, where people just kind of kludge in a bunch of rows and columns and make it look like a Gantt chart.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. I've, certainly Excel, I've used that for years prior, but I was introduced to Basecamp. If anybody's familiar with that, it was a company called 37 Signals. They used to have a huge portfolio of software, and then they consolidated it all back down to Basecamp. And that was my first, foray into using project management, software that was a little more is human centric, if that makes sense. Right? I know we use Asana, but that have you used those types of tools in your?
I have not.
Yeah,
change management.
I'm sorry.
I have not used Basecamp. No.
Oh yeah, there are others that are similar, and you sort of saw, several years ago this flowering or burst of tools that were all online based and collaborative, where you could have essentially cards that you would move across a board from inception to completion, and you would have ways of tracking tasks much more dynamically, and you could assign subtasks and subcards to different people, and it would all roll up nicely. And some were very simple and very, very just bare bones. Others were more complex. Rich, what I thought you were going to say is that you used a tool, and I couldn't tell if it was part of Basecamp or if 37 Signals had something that allowed you to do a little bit more of the stuff that's specific to change management in terms of looking at different stakeholders and aligning who needs more high touch, who just needs an inform, who's someone who's the decision maker or decision makers that need to be handled in a certain way, or allows you to set up a campaign where you sort of step through an alignment with the right people in the right order, things like that are maybe more like specific to change as opposed to just a project planner.
Sure. Yeah. Have you used anything like that?
No, not
okay.
directly. I think a lot of it has been created within other tools. So creating some sort of list of stakeholders, different companies call them different things. I've heard the term stakeholder spine several times, but essentially it's a list of key stakeholders, and then each one is labeled in some way with level of involvement needed, pre-socialization, decision-making, advise, or just inform, that kind of stuff. And those I've seen often created within an existing tool like Excel or PowerPoint or things like that. It just depends on the company I'm working with. And similar things for like a matrix. You can imagine a 2x2 grid of people who are needing to be engaged and the level of engagement needed and their criticality kind of thing. So that I've seen done, but in PowerPoint directly as a slide, and you can move people around fairly easily in PowerPoint. But I imagine there are tons of tools that allow you to do that are fit for purpose for change management. I just haven't explored any of them.
Something related though, and we are using it currently, and at my last role, we also incorporated it, but not a lot of people are able to use the thing that Asana has, which is those blockers. That's a tool that you cannot move forward with the project that you have created, that you have made, once you put those blockers in there. And that takes cooperation to make that work, right? First, you have to learn how to be really adept with putting appropriate blockers, right? And then you don't want to put someone on the spot when there's an overview. Oh, that would be done if over here, so like it's a touchy thing, but it is one of those things in a tool that we at Harmonious Workplace are currently using in Asana that puts that stressor on this has to happen in order and first before it can move forward. That's kind of...
And I love that concept is super transparent. And it doesn't have to be about blame or anything like that, or credit if you want to look at it from a positive spin, but it's very transparent and everyone can see this task, which we said was on our critical path, is not moving forward because X, Y, or Z didn't get done, or X, Y, or Z is late, or X, Y, or Z got done early. So we can move some things forward in our plan. It's just, everyone can see it. That's really nice having that transparency.
Yep. I will say that informally, I've used some software to kind of go what you were talking about, Ben, with creating kind of a matrix of who affects people and all that, right? I've used what is it called? Draw.io, which is, it's really just it's a piece of software online that allows you to create various different kinds of charts, right? And I've used it for different workflows, but I've also used it for like org charts, or to create a matrix of who's going to be involved, who are the stakeholders, who reports to whom, and then some of the relationships between people, what's their relationship like. Some of that actually came very recently from my training with the Drucker School, where we had a diagram that showed the relationships between people and their friendly relationships and then their subordinate relationships, which was really helpful.
Yeah.
But not within the software. Like not within the project management software like Basecamp or Asana. I've not done that type of thing.
Right. I've not seen that baked into something like Microsoft Project or other project management tools like Asana or the other ones I've seen. But I like that idea of being able to show kind of the network of people. And I remember doing something similar in my MBA training where you'd have the ability to show who's networked with who, but who influences who's influenced by someone. And then you can quickly see who are the key people you might want to target, who are key influencers or who are key decision makers that you need to go to. And are you directly connected, or do you have to go through an intermediary or several intermediaries to get to that person? And of course, in these sort of gamification situations, you have limited time or limited political capital to use or whatever it is. And so you try to maximize how you do that, which is in some ways what the real world is like.
Yeah.
But those are cool. What did you call that one, Rich?
That was called draw.io. But you could do similar things in PowerPoint. I didn't even think about using PowerPoint for that.
You could, but it gets a little ungainly. If there's something in draw.io that makes it easier to kind of map these connections and have them follow as you move people around, that's a little more elegant, a little bit.
It does keep the connections. Yeah. You can make it so that they're kind of magnetic and sticky. So when you
that's nice.
Around, it still keeps the connections. Nice. But and then Cheryl, what you were talking about with some of the start and stop relationships between different parts of a project. I've like those Gantt charts that show here's what we need to do and here's the schedule along the route and who's doing what. I found those very valuable in Basecamp, Asana, Trello, those types of things. And it's helpful to have that when we're working with the stakeholders because like your project sponsors, because they tend to want to see that at a glance and that you've been thinking about.
Right. And I did that early on with Excel, as you were saying, Ben, in that, just the fact that you could take all these numbers and make a pie chart, that was like magic in the 90s, right? It was like, oh,
absolutely.
We could figure out these numbers, or you could just look at this pie chart, right? And that was great. But I mean, there are so many tools that are so far past that. There are 3D tools. I had a brief stint with Atlassian, and it was so over my head. And thankfully, I didn't have to learn it. Truly, I breezed through it once, and I thought, well, I hope this is working for the company using it because I do not have the time for this. But it was very sophisticated, and presumably effective because of its levels of control and illustration and deadline setting and change management.
And Jira is a product that has been almost become industry standard for a lot of technical development projects. And it's a way of doing that project management. And it's somewhat amenable to an agile approach where you can assign basically levels of difficulty to a task, low, medium, high. And that means different things for different teams, but it allows the teams to bundle up a bunch of things that equate to a week or 2 weeks worth of work, depending upon how long your working block, your sprint is. So Jira has become, at least last time I was in that space, was very well regarded and
very popular, yeah,
and very visual too. And I think that was part of the attraction of it, is that sponsors, people who are not deep in the weeds of the technology that was being developed or deep in the weeds of the tool that managed, like Jira, that managed the development of the technology, but they could see at a glance, here's the 87 things that we want to do. I'm going to pick 7 to work on this week. And at a glance, every day you can see, slowly these things move from left to right, from conception to completion. And so it's a nice visual way of keeping everyone on the same page, super transparent. You can see who's working on what. Really nicely done. Speaking of tools, sorry to interrupt, but just there's one that's like magic whiteboard type of thing. The one I've used is called Miro. There are others that do similar kinds of things, but what's really nice is that you can use it as essentially a virtual whiteboard and do brainstorming as you're in that design or inception, or just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks phase with your stakeholders or with your key decision makers. And it's very visual and very easy, and it's very collaborative too. So if you're in a virtual setting, you can have everybody working and adding stickies and seeing who's adding what. And then you can all sort of agree, we're going to group these stickies together under this type of topic and these other stickies together under this topic. And then you can start to sequence things and assign who's responsible for what to this type of thing. So it's a really nice, and again, very visual, very easy to use software. Everyone can pick it up pretty quickly. I imagine there are others. I've used Miro, but I imagine there are others very similar to that.
Smartsheet.
But that's one that's nice to use. Sorry, Cheryl?
Smartsheet is also,
oh yeah, Smartsheet. That's like
a whiteboard, and we used it a lot in production.
Mm-hmm.
Those early stages of collaboration. It was so easy to just change the color of the stickies and then group, and it was really great.
That's funny you mentioned that, because Smartsheet I've used as a more virtual collaborative version of Excel, but I'd never used it as a sort of sticky board tool.
Yeah.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah. But we often would leave that sort of off to the side after we moved past the early brainstorming stages. And
yeah. Well, naturally, sure.
The work we did in that ended up being, more, artifacts more than anything. But when we, especially during COVID, when we had to work from home, it was helpful for brainstorming. It was that.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, sorry, Rich. At the end of the day, I was just going to say that it seems like so many projects that I've been on just revert to Excel and PowerPoint, and you make PowerPoint go through all these gyrations and manipulations and contortions that
things it was never designed to do.
No,
we're going to make it do it because we're used to it.
Because that's what the client's used to, and that's what they have, and it's just going to be easier in the long run than trying to introduce a whole new tool.
Yeah.
Yep.
You were going to go to a break, so I'm sorry I derailed.
No, I was, and yeah, just because I think first of all, I think it's time for a break, and second of all, I think when we come back, we're talking about using a lot of these tools. Are there any tools that can kind of centralize the use of these tools? So something to talk about there.
Tool to manage tools.
A tool to manage tools.
It's not a person.
I was going to say, you're looking at them, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So we'll talk more when we come back. At Harmonious Workplaces, we believe work should provide purpose, satisfaction, and growth. We empower people to thrive by fostering environments where individuals can find meaning in their work and organizations can succeed through thoughtful, well-executed strategies. We're committed to making work better for the people who do it and the leaders who guide them. To discover how Harmonious Workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. And we're back. So we have been talking about some, and we've only scratched the surface on this, right? Some communication tools that we can use in change management. And so we've thrown out a bunch of different...
The usual suspects, yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, PowerPoint,
Excel,
Jira, Smartsheets, Jira, Miro.
I like yours, Draw.io.
Yeah. So, but here's what happens is that we throw in these tools, and then how do we access these tools, and when do we access those, and all that?
And what do you know to use for what? I mean, I'm imagining a tradesperson who's got a hammer and a wrench and a screwdriver and file and pliers and duct tape all scattered on the floor, you need some kind of tool belt or a toolbox, right? So how do you?
Yep.
Great analogy.
So that's a great analogy. Have you had anything that you've used in the past for any of this?
Office 365.
Office 365.
That's the closest I've seen that marries many. Or in at Charlotte, I know some people think of it as rather evil, but the Google world that's trying to mimic that, right? So Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides, all of that. It's a similar concept. It's the wrapper for these individual tools. But I've not seen anything that blends all of these other non-brand tools together. For those looking for $1 million startup, bam.
I think we should get to work on it as soon as we're done here.
Or Rich, have you seen it?
I was going to say there's a couple of things I've seen people use.
Scratch that.
One
startup.
of the, yeah. Well, I mean, no, really, you can always be innovative with any of this, but SharePoint. So having SharePoint can be an internal website that you can create. So you have to have a Microsoft 365
part of the Microsoft world.
Yep, part of the Microsoft world. I'm not sure if Google has something similar to that in the Google Workspace, but you can. What I've done before in projects, and then I've done this for operations, even, right, is to have a central place where people can go. That's like a repository, and would have links to the various resources. So it might have a link to these Excel files. It might have a link to Asana or Basecamp or whatever, and that becomes like home base. I've also seen people use Atlassian and other knowledge bases for that type of thing, where it becomes an internal website that you can share with external collaborators and internal people. To again have these links and that's really all it serves as a way to have links, and sometimes you could even have project scorecards put into there,
dashboards and stuff. You have to manage all that though yourself. Like if you create a SharePoint, it's all manually managed. Maybe Microsoft is doing stuff with Copilot where you can enter in and say, create me a central repository and link to these things. But I guess I was thinking of something a little different that.
Yeah. Well, that's that. I have, and with AI today, and that's worth some exploration, right? Is I'm sure there are tools out there that simplify that process.
The dashboard, right? Dashboard tools with the console. Yeah.
What do you guys think about, since we've talked about the tools and the ways that people use different tools, and we've mentioned some brands, we've mentioned others conceptually, what do you think about talking a little bit more about, now that we know that there are certain tools that do things, what are some of those things that we might want to do? And that's sort of switching into the methodologies that we were talking about at the top of the show. That sort of was the maybe the other side of the coin to tools. You need the tools to help you do things, right. But then what is it that you're going to do? How are you going to start reaching some of these people that you want to connect with or want to engage with? Does it make sense to go there, or is that?
Yeah, no, totally makes sense.
Agile is the one that just screams Agile as a methodology, right? Like that's exactly right, Ben. It just screams. I have never used it, but I know that it is so prevalent and so popular. And every time I hear the word Scrum, I have to wonder.
Do you scream?
Yeah. So I would love to hear your experiences with it, and if you think that it is still gaining popularity, or like a lot of tools we've talked about kind of level off and then where's Agile in the world? Still going, right?
Where's Boulder?
Yeah.
Well, it's got these pockets of care for the teams and the people, right? It's got these levels of acknowledgement and celebration and reflection, right? Yep. That's my favorite part about what I understand of it. And if you guys,
Everybody likes a good party.
everyone likes a good party until they don't, until it doesn't seem sincere or authentic. If it's baked in, does it work in change, and does it keep people motivated? Because that ties into a lot of things we talk about all the time.
Yeah. I've leveraged in the past working with tech implementations or even, some process changes, working with an internal team, usually bringing in some other third party. We have used things like Asana or Basecamp to schedule in, 2-week Scrum meetings, right? So to go over what's the next sprint look like, what's this minimally viable product MVP that we look for at the end of that time. Like what is the work package that needs to be delivered with? Yes, I did do it.
Yeah, you heard it too, right?
I heard that. But yeah, using a tool like a project management software that allows you to put your documents into one place and have everything centralized, I think is very helpful. And then it also schedules it in. So when you're looking at the Gantt chart, you can see we have our catch-up meetings or whatever you want to call them, scheduled out for these specific times.
You just made me think, Rich. Do you think one of the more tedious parts, no matter how good your tool is, someone still has to plot and plop it out onto a calendar? I suppose there must be many companies using AI at this point say, here's all the steps, here's everything we need to do, and then just throw it into that and have your Gantt chart made or have your calendar made, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's.
And you also have integration points with a lot of this software to put that into your, whether it's Microsoft Tasks or your Google Workspace, and put it into your calendar or a task or something that'll give you a reminder, Yeah.
Right.
That would be a good question. I have not seen any AI-driven project management creation yet. I've seen it where you can have virtual meeting recorded, or you can have your own task list set up and maybe get to the point where it's scheduling tasks for you or drafting emails to send based on what those action items were so you can follow up with people. But I've not seen it go to the level of, here is your project plan. Here are all the things that you need to do based on this meeting, based on decisions made. Here's how some dates are shifting. Or we had a person who left the business, or we just hired some person, so now we're going to assign that person to this task and they're going to own that. Or someone got a promotion, so now it's going to be run by this other group, so we're going to have to shift out who owns what. And I've not seen anything where that's fully automated in an AI-driven way. But I would imagine that that's not too far around the corner, because you're right, Cheryl. A lot of that is human driven, and it's a lot of the manipulation of a tool to get to the point where that tool is useful to communicate information. And those are things that it would seem would be ripe for automation.
That's a great point, Ben. And I don't know either. Maybe Rich knows a use for AI in that calendar is if it's common by now, using calendars to plan the whole timeline.
Well, I'm not too sure about all of what AI does. I mean, literally, there are websites out there that are showing like literally tens of thousands of different AI applications now. But just a quick web search, we use Asana, but so a quick web search on just Asana shows that they're using AI now for workflows and automations based on prompts that you put in there. Now, we haven't used it yet, but this is the world we live in. We're baking artificial intelligence into a lot of these types of things.
Into everything, yeah. I mean, it's only going to be a matter of time before that builds out a full project plan and manages that plan based on whatever is discussed at a stand-up meeting or at a decision-making meeting. It will happen. I'm not sure I've seen it quite yet.
Sure.
So for the meantime, you're stuck with me as a tool.
You're not a tool, Ben.
Hey, I'd be happy, in 5 years when AI has taken over the world, I'd be happy to be that tool.
That's right.
Right.
Good. Okay. Break number 2.
Yeah, let's take a quick break and we'll wrap this up when we come back. Dysfunctional organizational cultures and poorly managed transformations can devastate employee morale and motivation, leading to disengaged employees, poor work quality, and the loss of your best people. The impacts to your organization include high costs, low productivity, and wasted resources. At Harmonious Workplaces, our purpose is to help you build the best workplace possible. We are advisors applying proven organizational development and industrial organizational psychology methodologies to help you become your best organization. We are doers, using time-tested principles to help you execute organizational change initiatives smoothly and successfully. To discover how Harmonious Workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. And we're back. So we've been talking about communication tools, and again, I can't even say scratching the surface. Like we are, in the layers of this, we are microscopically just shaving the top off of this, right? But outside of some of the tech tools that we've talked about, we were also talking about some methodologies here. How can we better use communication tools? Kind of put a tidy bow on this for our change management projects.
I guess my takeaway would be that it's important when you think of a master craftsman, that person knows exactly what tool is meant to be used to accomplish what task. And so that master carpenter or master electrician would never use a tool that's not fit for purpose. And as change professionals, it's important for us to know what tools can we leverage to accomplish the tasks that we want to accomplish. So if I want to reach a very broad number of people with a fairly high level information push, something like email, something like a newsletter, something like Rich, you mentioned before, SharePoint or an internal website, those are going to be really good, very high level push things. Maybe an explainer video that's like a 2-minute type of thing, easy for people to consume, one way, not going to take a long time. If I want to have a dialogue with someone, either real time or asynchronously, that's going to be a different tool that I would use or a different methodology I would use, maybe a meeting or a virtual meeting or a one-on-one, something like that. Just, again, it's that what tool are you going to use to accomplish your goals? And that's where I feel like there's that marrying of tool and methodology and then wisdom or expertise to understand what you can do to get done what you need to do.
It's a great analogy to the master craftsman knowing his tools. And then the human has to add the creative output. What do I need to make and how do I get there, right? So these projects, when we innovate using the tools that we have, sometimes we have to take those to the next level, just like we might have to take like a scroll tool to the next level of what we need to scroll,
Yep.
You made me think about PowerPoint, Ben, just briefly. I remember hearing a long time ago that it was not supposed to have all the content that you're speaking to because it's about making points and bullet points and PowerPoints. And it's funny how when that was new, it was like, wow, I have this great tool that I can get across my points visually. But the idea always was that you would speak a lot more in between the bullet points. And then over time, how many times have you seen a deck where there's so much content on the slide, it's been completely bastardized into basically a Word document. And so that got lost in the translation over time somewhere, right? So
Yeah.
I would like to speak to not only knowing your audience and what tools are best to convey the kinds of information that you need to convey, but training is so important. Your tool will fail if people don't use it, and they're not going to use it if it's not trained properly. And what motivates learning, but coming back to that why too, right? Like,
Yep.
How many times, being honest, how many times have I used a C wrench as a hammer?
can't count.
I mean, I wouldn't even want to begin to count because that's what I got in my hand, and it's good for whacking.
And it gets the job done.
Yeah.
It gets it done, but it's a little kludgy, and maybe the nail goes in a little wonky. And in a 2 years, that whatever I was nailing is going to fall
A
apart.
wall. Yeah.
I'm having a bit of a visceral reaction to the disrespect you've given that wrench.
You don't want to see my butter knives then, because that's a whole nother nightmare.
I'm there. I do that all the time. Like screwdriver, butter knife. Can't say I haven't used the meat tenderizer to drive a nail in somewhere. But I get it. But at the same time,
I have to my husband bought me a hammer, and when he handed it to me, he said, "Just remember, not everything is a nail." Go on, Rich, please.
Maybe that's the mic drop moment right there. I think maybe that's this episode in a nutshell.
Not everything is a nail.
That's true. Well, one of the confusing parts I've noticed in my change projects has been when you introduce a communication tool to everybody who has not used it before, and now you've just involved another huge change into the mix.
You're welcome.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're welcome. Here you go.
Wrapping up.
And they don't know how to use it, so they're going to do similar things where they're going to they're either going to ignore it completely. That
and
happens,
it dies on the vine, and the people who learned it and used it become a little bit mad about that, and the money is gone, and that happens.
Yep, that happens. Or you have people who are using it for all the wrong reasons and all the not using it for its intended purpose, and driving the nail in with that C wrench. So I think one of the things that I like to do when I get into a change situation is part of that assessment process is what is everybody using right now, and how can we leverage that instead of having to introduce something new to everybody. Does that make sense?
Super smart.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or if you do have to introduce it, can you stage it so that it comes later, just so that it's not everything all at once? Because you're right, Rich. That is
right. Yeah. Just I can recall being so ambitious about a CRM implementation and going, okay, now I'm going to teach you all how to use this thing, and everything is over here on SharePoint, and they're like, "What's SharePoint? What is that?" And I'm like, "Oh no, it's there. They've had it. They just never used it, and I didn't bother to figure out what they were using before, which was literally like a shared they would have had a shared Word document on the drive, which would have served the same purpose, right?
Which conceptually is more or less the exact same thing. It's just instead of going to a Word document on a shared drive, you're going to a SharePoint site that maybe looks a little different. Conceptually, it's the same. So helping people get over that mental hurdle can sometimes be harder than training on the new tool or whatever it is. It's,
So true.
Yeah. So, know the audience, know what you have, kind of get an assessment of, keep it simple. There you go. Right. For sure. And not everything's a nail. All right. Well, we have come to that time, folks, where we bid everybody adieu. Thank you all for joining us today, and we hope that you've gotten some value out of our discussion. Certainly, we want to hear your comments and
tell us your favorite tools.
Absolutely, please.
And we have guests next time, don't we?
We have a guest on the next episode. Yeah, 2, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Super exciting. Stay tuned.
Coming soon. All right. Well, until we meet again, folks, we raise a glass to you. Make change your friend.
You're here.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode. To contact Rich or Cheryl, please visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com. To connect with Ben, find him on LinkedIn or visit at www.harborsidestrategy.com.
If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning.
It totally looks like we're drinking liquor at the end when we do it like that.
Wait, you guys are
Who's to
not?
say we're
I know,
not?
I know.
Yeah.